Right. Good day, everyone. Welcome to this Fintelekt ABA webinar on AML and data privacy. For those of you that I have not met before, my name is Shirish Pathak. I'm the founder of Fintelekt. Firstly, many thanks to the Asian Bankers Association for partnering with us for this webinar. As banks and financial institutions and other reporting entities or covered persons or regulated entities strengthen their AML controls while responding to increasingly stringent data protection laws, compliance teams face growing challenges in balancing transparency, information sharing, customer monitoring, and privacy obligations. So, this brings us to the classic AML privacy paradox. To identify suspicious activity, one has to monitor transactions and build deep customer profiles. However, data privacy regulations enforce what is called purpose limitation and data minimization. In addition, different countries are adopting varying approaches to data localization, to cross border sharing, to customer consent, investigative access. And this creates operational and legal complexities across markets, especially impacting those institutions that operate globally. So today we will explore how institutions are navigating this intersection of privacy and financial crime compliance and discuss practical approaches to managing this paradox. I'm joined today by three senior compliance professionals from three different countries. Sheila, Ricca, Dioso, Chief Compliance Officer, RCBC Philippines; Thilani, Punyawansa, Chief Compliance Officer of DFCC Bank Sri Lanka; and Dioso, Head of Training and Professional Development at the Compliance Institute of Zambia. Sheila, Thilani, Joseph, thank you so much for joining us. And audience, as always, if there are questions, please post them in the Q&A window, and we will take it up at the end of the webinar, subject to the availability of time. Kicking off the discussion, let me start with maybe Sheila first. So, Sheila, do you believe there is a conflict essentially between AML CFT obligations and data
Mm.
protection laws, or is the challenge largely due to the absence of clear regulatory guidance, actually?
Shirish, actually, I think it's less of an existential conflict, but more of a structural friction. Um, you see, there's a dual mandate, no? AML seeks to protect the stakeholders. On the other hand, Data Privacy Acts protects the individual's right to data autonomy. So naturally, there is friction between the two intention. Now, usually it comes down to operationalizing two different principles. AML requires data maximization. You gather as much data as you can so that you're able to understand patterns, you're able to understand sources of wealth, how things are, how monies flow from one account to another. Whereas data privacy hinges on data minimization, so there's really a conflict there. So for data privacy, you only collect. The principle is that you only collect what is strictly necessary, and what is proportionate. However, it's not necessarily conflicting with each other. So we're quite lucky here in the Philippines. Rather than an absence of guidance, very recently, our regulators has adopted a new law which is called the AFASA, or the Anti-Financial Account Scamming Act. And that actually requires lifting of data privacy considerations when we are fighting against money laundering activities or even for fraud. Now, so that also allows us to share information across financial institution. And so instead of being in conflict with each other, it actually enabled the bank to share those information in order to prevent and fight fraud and AML.
Right. Thanks, Sheila. Tilani, can I get your comments on this?
Yeah, to add to what Sheila said, I tend to agree with her. Basically, even I feel there's no conflict between the two frameworks. Rather, I think they are complementary because both objectives of both the frameworks is to protect the customers and the financial institution as well. So, if we consider that now, for an example, as my colleague mentioned there, data minimization is a must under data protection. But under AML CFT regulations, we say get as much as possible. Know about your customer, know the source of funds, how he operates or how the company operates likewise. So, but there's a basis for that. AML CFT regulations tell us this is a mandatory or rather legal requirement. So when we have the legal basis, that is our safeguard with when it comes to data protection requirements. If we have the legal basis, if we have a legal purpose, then collecting data required for that purpose is not barred by the data protection regulations.
Right. Joseph, what's your experience from the Zambia point of view?
Yeah, thank you very much, Shirish. So I do tend to agree with Thilani and Sheila. Definitely, I don't think there's any conflict between the two regulations. If you look at the spirit of the law itself, I think on one hand, we're trying to protect the integrity of the financial system itself, whereas also just trying to safeguard the data of the individuals that are actually operating with this financial system. So basically, if you look at the acts themselves, I think that are speaking to anti-money laundering as well as the data privacy. When we look at even just from the FATF recommendations, we need to collect enough data as well from our customers in terms of CDD. We look at recommendation 16 in terms of the travel rule, payment transparency. We need to be able to collect data to be able to ensure that at the end of the day, we're able to actually fight money laundering as well as proliferation of and terrorism. But then when we also go to data privacy, the principle is basically just to ensure that we only get enough information to do our work. So basically, there is no conflict, but it's just giving us additional guidance. So what just needs to happen right now is for us to have more guidance, where we are actually ensuring that at the end of the day, we do not limit our fight against AML CFT with regards to having a heavy law in terms of data privacy. If we were to actually be more heavy on this aspect, definitely it means we will not actually collect any data from anybody, and actually our fight against money laundering would actually be hampered. But then the law itself is just giving you an thing guidance to ensure that whatever you're collecting actually is for a lawful purpose, and of which that as well qualifies with regards to money laundering and thing terrorist financing prevention. So definitely the two are not in conflict, but the two are meant to actually support one another, and we can be able to work with more guidelines just to ensure that there is a smooth transition in terms of sharing of data. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Joseph. All right. Before we proceed to the next question that I have, let's run a quick poll for the audience. Can we have the first poll up, please, so that we also understand what the participants are thinking? All right. So may I request the participants to answer this poll so that our panelists know what the audience is thinking? I think those of you who've joined on Zoom are probably able to see the poll. Those of you who have moved to YouTube will probably not be able to see it. All right, so let's share these results. We've got about half the audience that has already posted. Any comments, Sheila, Joseph, or Thilani, on these results? What do you think?
I'm happy to see that it has improved customer trust without affecting AML. I think it hits the requirements and the objectives of both laws or both concepts. No, but I do understand also that it made it more complicated. But still, but happy to see that it is manageable. So it's not really, so it just goes to show that it's not really in terms of the lack of rules, no, but it's the heavy operational lift of mapping our workflows to make sure that they are complementing, or they don't, at the very least, no, we're both in compliance with both of those laws.
Right. Joseph, were you about to say something?
Yes, I think I'm actually very impressed that I think the audience actually has actually sided with the aspect that it actually has improved the customer trust without affecting AML. So this is actually a very positive observation that I think is coming out. And yes, much as it has also affected in terms of having the AML safety processes a bit more complicated, but then I think it is still manageable, and I think the audience is what I think does reflect what I think is expected. Thank you.
Right. Thilani, any comments on the poll?
Yeah, I think it's more about now, rather than us simply collecting data that was done earlier, it's more about building trust in customers. Customers are quite aware of these requirements now. So when they question, if we can give them a very clear, transparent response saying, this is the purpose why we are collecting this data, maybe it's for your own safety. And if we can build that trust in the customer's mind, I think this both frameworks will be rather complementary to each other rather than, seen as contradicting.
Right. Thanks, Thilani. All right, let's move to the next question that I have for you all. On the regulation side. So let me just switch off this poll quickly. All right. So there's a Sheila and Joseph. Let me ask this question to you both. How are regulators in your country actually helping financial institutions navigate, these, arguably competing obligations? Would you say that the existing guidelines and supervisory expectations are sufficiently clear, or is further guidance needed?
Joseph, you want to
So
go
let's
on this one?
yes. All right, I'll take a go with it first. So basically here in Zambia, what we're actually currently experiencing is that the Regulation and Data Protection Act actually was enacted in 2021. However, enforcement started very late, which was last year. And this is still a journey in terms of enforcement. So right now, enforcement is still something that is still not heavily enforced. But then one thing that has, I think, been commendable with the regulator, the Office of the Data Protection Commission, is that they have been having a number of webinars in terms of sensitizing people in terms of the obligations with regards to data protection. And one of the key things that I think is also coming out is that I think they have been on site in terms of just trying to be handful in terms of helping us at least implement these aspects. From the other regulators, such as the Bank of Zambia, the Financial Intelligence Center, we do have also different workshops that we've actually been having with them in terms of also just trying to balance out in terms of our AML safety thing obligations as reporting entities. So the regulators are actually having those discussions, but I think those things also have to be heightened so that I think we can be able to have clearer guidelines, because currently one of the key issues that people are actually facing right now is the aspect of data transfer, because there is also one end where you also have to be able to justify to the regulator to see why are you transferring this data outside the republic. So there's an aspect of you applying for forbearance with regards to the Data Protection Act. So those are guidelines that haven't really been very clear, and it still remains as a gray area. But we are optimistic that guidelines will definitely be issued in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks. Sheila?
I think for the Philippines, regulators are shifting from a siloed enforcement approach to a more collaborative one. Um, so they're more into coordinated interagency approach. So as early as 2021, um, there's actually an advisory issued by the Privacy Commission here in the Philippines, which explicitly clarified that financial institution can share relevant information for fraud and financial crime investigation under the protection of lawful rights and interests clause of the Data Privacy Act. So, and this does not require a prior court order. So this just goes to show that they are contributing to that cause. And I mentioned earlier about a recent breakthrough, which is the AFASA, which is the AFASA law, or the AFASA breakthrough. No, so the enactment of this AFASA law, which is implemented this year, is that it's implementing circular represents a leap forward, explicitly stating that deposit secrecy and data privacy laws do not apply to financial account being investigated, no, for prohibited fraudulent acts. I'd say that this is a massive step forward from the Philippine regulators and we're happy to see that they are being collaborative with one another, as opposed to leaving the banks in the middle and trying to balance the two regulatory requirements.
Right. Thanks, Sheila. So, you mentioned collaboration, and I think today it's a known fact that information sharing and public-private partnerships, private-private partnerships are very key to fighting financial crime. So, Joseph, coming back to you, do you think stricter data protection requirements make PPPs or information sharing more difficult?
Well, it
Yes, sir.
will. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joseph. Sorry.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead. Go
So,
ahead.
sure, thank you. So, with regards to that, in terms of the partnerships, definitely, if we actually were to heavily regulate and enforce data privacy, like said, it would mean that we won't be able to actually even collect any information from the data subjects. But then we need to take a moderate approach with regards to that aspect, so that at the end of the day, people are able to share data. Because one of the key things is that from the AML side of things, we need more data to be able to analyze or profile our customers, and as well as also monitor those transactions that are also happening. So for us to be able to carry out our work on the AML safety side, we need that data. So if you have a heavy regulation with regards to data privacy, then definitely this would actually get to affect our partnerships, because no one will be willing to share data, because definitely they obviously be expecting a penalty from the regulators. So there has to be that balance between the two, so that at the end of the day, both are able to achieve the objectives without hampering the other. Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph. Sheila?
Well, Joseph said much about it. No, essentially, if you come to think of it, if there are more stricter requirements, no, from a data protection perspective, by the time that the banks or financial institution gets a hold of those information, the money will that's subject to AML is probably gone, no, by that time. So you can just imagine the speed of the information and the access to the information that one requires, no, to be able to effectively stop these transactions and identify that those transactions are either potentially fraudulent or is subject to AML risk. But I guess rather than looking at, there's another side to it. I see another side to it, wherein it's not inherently. It could be in a way that it's not inherently stopping the information sharing. But they are stopping unregulated, reckless sharing. So it's like in the principle of garbage in, garbage out type of approach, wherein you only want to ingest data that are important for your cause or important for whatever you're doing. No, and so there's two sides to it. No, if you frame it in that sense, wherein you can share information if it serves a purpose, no, so it's not entirely stopping just the sharing just because, no, but those that don't serve any purpose, then I agree that those are things that shouldn't be shared recklessly by anyone.
Right. Thanks, Sheila. Uh, Thilani, let me come back to you, and ask you now, with data privacy becoming a much more visible public issue, are your frontline teams finding it harder to obtain whatever customer information is needed for AML purposes? And how do you address these customer concerns, if any?
Yeah. In a way, since customers are quite aware of the requirements, there could be challenges. But I think rather than the challenge would not be customers resisting, rather than explaining to them the requirement. So, say for an instance, when a customer brings in a high value cash deposit, if we ask them the source of funds or the earnings, how he has got that money, maybe he might resist saying that why do you need to know that much of information. But if he can explain the basis, this is not out of our curiosity, but it is as a regulatory requirement or other legal requirement. If he can convince the customer there is a legal basis for the bank to ask that question, then there won't be a problem, there won't be a resistance. Similarly, say there's a highly structured company, and if we query about the ultimate beneficial owners, sometimes companies might resist providing such information. There again, if we can provide them the legal basis, the requirement why we need it, it's an international standard. If you can provide the customer with a clear, transparent response, then I don't think there's a challenge. So the way we tackle it is ensure that our frontline staff is well trained to build that trust in the customer, because they'll worry about three things: why my information is being taken by the bank, what they're going to do it, and how will that be protected, will it be used for some other purpose. So if we can convince the customer, no, this is the basis we collect your information, and this is how we're going to process it, use it, and this how we're going to retain it. If we can train our frontliners to communicate that message to the customers, I don't think the challenge will be there. That is what we're doing. So reinforcing training and ensure that our frontline staff can communicate that requirement very clearly to the customers. That is how we tackle that.
Right. Thanks, Thilani. Joseph and Sheila, would you like to comment on this point? Are you seeing this sort of pushback from customers and feedback from your frontline staff?
Let's Sheila go first.
Thank you. No, I do agree with what Thilani mentioned. It's really about shifting that narrative. No, from point of view where it's more bureaucratic, that you're telling your client, I need this information because it's the law. The regulatory requirement, the regulators ask us to have this information on our file and consider this in our risk profiling, etc. That wouldn't work. No, but if you frame it in a perspective where it becomes information that contributes to proactive customer protection and that type of narrative, then they're more willing to give information. Another thing is that the principle of transparency is something that we advocate, wherein our privacy notices actually explicitly states why AML data is collected. No, and normally, if the when the client feels that this actually protects their accounts from potential takeovers or identity theft, then that friction of them not wanting to share the information drops significantly. Now, in the experience of the bank from an onboarding perspective, we don't have much issues on them. There will be, I can't say that there are no instances where clients question, why do you need this data? This probably happens every now and then, but the important thing there is the narrative that we give to our clients.
Right.
Right. Thank you for that. I think I do actually concur with Thilani and Sheila. I think key thing is about transparency. And I think if we look at the poll that I think was displayed, I think the views are actually expressing that there is actually more trust from the customers because they're actually being made aware of their rights. And basically, I think for the financial institutions, the key role that is actually being asked for right now is actually for us to be able to train more of our staff with regards to data privacy. In the past, we would focus on AML CFT trainings for the frontline staff. But now the narrative has changed because we have to also train them more with regards to data privacy. Because the customer will walk in and actually ask to say, why do you need this information? And if the frontline staff does not understand or has not undertaken the data privacy training, then there lies in the challenge. But if they are aware of the data privacy regulations that are there and why they're collecting that information and are able to explain to the customers, then you do not have a challenge there, because that gives the customer trust, because that is almost like transparency that we're trying to build as well.
Right. Thanks, Joseph. All right. So I'm going to now come to one point which everybody's talking about these days, and that is AI, that is artificial intelligence. So as banks and financial institutions are increasing their reliance on AI, on advanced analytics to detect financial crime. Do data protection requirements risk limiting their effectiveness? And how do you think institutions can strike the right balance between, let's say, innovation and privacy? So again, well, Sheila, would you like to comment on that?
I'd like to think that privacy requirement don't limit the AI effectiveness. They actually make AI models more ethical, no, and like what I said earlier, it's less prone to garbage in and garbage out. Um, if we putting in the right data protection framework, actually builds that blueprint on responsible AI, and privacy policies, like proportionality, force us to build cleaner data pipelines, and therefore we actually get more valuable data for our purpose. Now, there are other ways on how you can look at generation of that much data, without necessarily um, violating privacy concerns, no, like there are privacy enhancing technologies out there, like you have anonymization, tokenization, no, and then we are able to train analytics, no, advanced analytics models to spot these transactions without necessarily exposing personally identifiable information for of the customers.
Right. Joseph, any thoughts on this?
Right, thank you very much for that. And I think from my end, I think it's two sides of the coin, because I think on one hand, when we look at the data privacy, and when we look at a number of countries that are also actually advocating for data localization, that I think for me becomes the biggest challenge with regards to the use of AI and its effectiveness. Because if we are going to actually advocate more for data localization, it means it hampers the aspect of also data sharing. And most of the AI modules that we're using are not actually homegrown solutions. And they also need to have more data, I think, from international perspective, to be able to actually, I think, assess more complex, sophisticated AML CFT schemes. So definitely, I think it does also affect the effectiveness of AI if we actually advocate for strong data protection regulations. Because again, when you look at the AI modules, for them to really learn more, they also need to have more data retained for a number of years. But then we go to data privacy again, we're looking at the aspect of also a shorter retention period with regards to AML CFT data that we're trying to store as well. So definitely there comes in a bit of a challenge, as well as also looking at the aspect of us also ensuring that we're able to also justify in terms of how decisions were made with regards to AI models. So with regards to data privacy, we have to also have the human aspect as well coming into play to also understand the models that I think we're trying to utilize. So if we want to really use sophisticated AI models, it means we won't understand the logic as well. So to an extent, definitely these regulations are kind of a bit hampering in terms of the effectiveness of AI. But then in terms of proper governance, I think that could also help us in terms of bridging the gap between the two. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Joseph. In fact, my next question was going to be to Thilani on governance. But before we move to that one, we have one more poll for the audience. So if we can have that one up, please. All right. So, audience, I invite you to answer this poll. When AML and data protection requirements appear to conflict, what usually determines your institution's decision? And we have a few options listed over there. Right. Give it a few more seconds for the poll to finish. We also have a couple of questions in the Q&A box, which we will take live in a few minutes. And until then, if any of you have more questions, please feel free to post them in the Q&A window, and we'll take them up at the end of this session. All right. So let's share the results of the poll. So again, Joseph, Sheila, Thilani, any comments on this answer?
Well,
So the
it's an interesting result because I think it's almost balanced out with regards to spread across. So
Yeah.
definitely, yes, I think with regards to AML and data protection, I think requirements definitely when there seems to be a conflict, I think the fact that AML has been there for a long time, whereas the data privacy, I think, is something that is still being enforced, and a number of guidelines are still being issued out. So definitely, most people will definitely have to run to the regulatory guidance or supervisory expectations. So most of the most of the financial institutions definitely want to inquire from the regulators to get at least more guidance before they could proceed with something. But then it also comes back to the speed of the regulator also responding to your concerns as well, because you might perhaps send an email today, but maybe only get the feedback a day or two, but then you need to make the decision today, because at the end of the day, money would have moved. So definitely others of us will rush to the AML or compliance teams because they have been working with the compliance teams for the longest time. Like said, data privacy is something that's been coming up over time. So after the MO safety teams, definitely would obviously expect them now to run to legal and data privacy teams. So I think the results, I think, are reflective, I think, of what we'll be obtaining. Thank you.
Right. Sheila, Thilani, any comments on this poll result?
I totally agree with Joseph.
Yeah, same here.
Relying on regulatory guidance or supervisory expectations, I don't know how much time we have usually, and it's probably depending on the case. No, but if a decision needs to be made, I don't think that will be your route. As Joseph said, it'll probably take them a day or two if they give you a straightforward answer at all. Regulators tend to not respond in a straightforward manner. They would give you the concepts, no, and then it will be left for your interpretation, for your own risk assessment. So again, it depends. If you have more time, you can, probably this is the best route. It makes you think more of what else to consider other than those that you initially have. But I agree with Joseph. The likelihood there is it will be the first one, legal or the data privacy team's interpretation, when it comes down to a decision, or AML or compliance team's assessment, when it comes down to a decision that needs to be made faster.
Right. Thilani?
Yeah, tend to agree with them. So anyway, our PDPA came in year 2022, so we are still rolling it out. The authority is yet to be established. Maybe, as Joseph very correctly said, AML safety regulations were there for like more than a decade now. So we are yet to experience the implementation challenges with regard to PDPA.
Right. All right. Fantastic. Okay. Let me move to my last question now, and after that, we'll take up the audience questions. So, Thilani, coming back to you, what governance measures would you say have been most important in helping your institution balance these AML and data protection obligations?
Yeah, the key thing would be not treating these two as two different two different frameworks, rather embedding everything into one governance framework. So as with any governance framework, the first step would be formulating the right set of policies and procedures, ensuring that the data protection requirements plus the AML safety requirements are met with. So once you have that in place, then it's a matter of implementing. So for that, you need your cross-functional teams, risk, compliance, audit, IT, especially data protection, CISO. Everybody should work together as a team and ensure the key essence of the policies and procedures are embedded smoothly across the institution. Then the deliverables, the front-end users. You've got to train your staff. As we mentioned throughout this discussion, that is your the key contact point with the customer. So if you don't convey the message across to your customers clearly and build that trust we talked about, this whole governance framework might fail. So you got to train your staff comprehensively, continuously, and whenever there's a change, whenever there's an amendment to be done, such should be done, and ensure the frontliners can deliver the message very clearly across. And of course, shouldn't forget about the IT systems and the data security systems. You have to have a robust system to ensure that once the data is with you, it is your property. How you process it, how you dissect it, how you deliver it, retain, everything must be secured under lock and key sort of a way, and ensure that there are any provision of leakage, breach shouldn't be there. So that is the framework that we've embedded and ensure that all pillars, all corners are touched upon.
Thanks, Thilani. Sheila, would you like to comment on this one in terms of governance measures that you found useful?
Totally agree with Thilani. I think the alignment among the units that she mentioned, AML, data privacy, risk, and whoever needs to be on board, the alignment really needs to be there. They need to work together.
Joseph, what would you say about governance measures?
Thanks. So I think with regards to governance measures, I think I do think I agree with Thilani as well as Sheila. I think the starting point is definitely having the right policies in place. I think well, with the two regulations are in place, you have to ensure that at the end of the day, you actually integrate your policies. So even as you're doing your your data privacy impact assessment, you're also looking at the AML CFT data that you're collecting from there, and then you're also justifying why you're collecting various information at different points and how you're also going to control that information. So definitely that also gets to inform your next steps. And what has also helped in terms of also just trying to secure the data, because once you have the data with you, how are you securing it? So with the privacy laws, one of the key things that's also coming into play is how you safeguard the data, how you transmit it in a secure manner. So governance frameworks such as ISO 27001, which is the Information Management System standard, I think is also giving us a number of controls that I think we've put in place in terms of encrypting data, ensuring that the data is only accessible by the right staff, so that also gets to help in terms of the various controls that you put in place in terms of your data transfers, your retention periods as well, being automated in terms of ensuring that you don't store the data for longer than usual. So definitely those are the controls that I think we've been putting in place via the implementation of ISO 27001 as well as 22301, which is the business continuity management system. And then on course right now is the implementation of the data privacy ISO standard, which is ISO 27701, just to help us strengthen the measures around AML safety as well as data privacy in terms of bridging the gap. Thank you.
Right. Let's take a few questions from the audience. But before we take the questions, I have a couple of quick announcements. And maybe while I make the announcements, if I may urge the panelists to take a look at the two questions that are in the Q&A window and possibly, think of your answers to that. And I will come back to that. So on the 19th of August, Fintelekt and ABA will run a 90-minute virtual workshop on preparing your institution for FATF's fifth round of mutual evaluations. This will be taught by Edgar Lopez, former director of the FI of Gibraltar. So if you're in a country that is currently preparing for the FATF fifth round of mutual evaluations, reporting entities, whether they are banks, insurance companies, capital markets, participants, payment services, virtual assets, casinos, any sectors that are regulated under the Money Laundering Act in your country are expected to demonstrate not only compliance with AML CFT requirements, but also the effectiveness of their control frameworks in practice. So the revised FATF methodology places greater emphasis on institutional risk understanding, the application of proportionate controls, the contribution of the private sector to national AML objectives. So this means being able to provide evidence on how money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing risks are identified, assessed, and translated into effective governance, customer due diligence, transaction monitoring, and reporting of STRs. So this virtual masterclass will provide you with an overview of FATF expectations. Also, the next FCAP, that is the Fintelekt Certified AML Safety Professional 2-day in-person training program, will take place later this month, that is July 28th and 29th in Manila at the Makati Diamond Residences. So those of you attending this webinar today from the Philippines may wish to take a look at that program. I know the intake is almost full. I believe as of today we have just 3 seats left. But if you would like to attend, please check the link in the chat window. And of course, my colleague Arpita and I will be in Manila in the last week of July for FCAP. So if any of you would like to catch up, send me a message at shirish@fintelekt.com and we can try to meet up. Moving now to the questions. Let me just get those out. All right. So the first question that we have is by Barnabas Ferenczi, who's actually, I believe, logged in from the EU. He asks, to what extent does the EU's approach, whether it is GDPR, AMLR, PSR, influence how you think about these issues in your own countries? Would any of you like to take a look at that question or answer that question?
I could probably take a crack on this, Shirish.
Sure.
I think the way that it's being described here is that it's very similar to what the AFASA law in the Philippines is trying to achieve. No, it's essentially enabling the exchange of data across organizations or financial institution without necessarily triggering data privacy laws. No, very. I think it's similar to that, and probably maybe even the inspiration for the AFASA law is that GDPR, or that those that are done in other countries. So.
Right. Joseph or Thilani, would you like to comment on this question? The influence of the EU's approach to what you're doing in your country?
I think the
So I think
GDPR. Yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
Tilly can go first. All right, okay, so I'll go first here. So with regards
Yes.
to, I think the data sharing, I think across banks and fintechs, I think in a compliant way. I think for now, I think from our end, it's something that is still in discussion because I think we still have a few gray areas with regards to data sharing. Because I think one of the key things that I think most of the banks and the fintechs I think have been looking at is us having a local PEP list, and currently because there's a regulation that is in place right now with data privacy, there's still that caution with regards to whether we can be able to share data on the various PEP lists that we have from the various institutions and how we can consolidate these. So currently, it's something that I think we're still engaging our regulators from our end, so we can also have this kind of approach in terms of sharing data. Thank you.
Thank
Now,
you.
in Sri
Thilani?
Lankan context, of course, sharing data between institutions is at very minimal level, doesn't happen at all. Unless there's some sort of a regulatory intervention or court order or something like that, we do not share. As I said, PDPA is effective from 2022 and we are still in the process of implementing. So, data sharing between or among financial institutions or with other institutions is not taking place at the moment in Sri Lanka, unless we share that with the regulator.
Right. All right. There's another question which is specifically for Sheila. It has to do with, it's a Philippine specific context. So this question is by Tommy Hartono. He says, I'm currently helping a Philippines-based fintech to comply with new BSP AFASA requirements. After the BSP audit, there is a lot more data needed to be passed that might affect data privacy. What are your thoughts on this? I also heard there will be a new update, ASP AML report template with 1 year to comply. What is your thought on this? Are we expecting updates more often in years to come? Salamat po.
Mm, okay. I think the AML reporting template that was referred to is on either the SPR reporting templates. No, it just gives or just it requests additional information to be included in there. As I've said, AFASA actually takes out or explicitly talks about um data privacy not applying when it comes to investigation that are related to potential fraud or AML cases. And so when we talk about information that are required related to those types of investigations, then no, I think the financial institution need not to worry about it. In fact, there's a lot of provision in that of FASA where apart from sharing information, there's also it also creates a safe harbor for financial institution to be able to hold the fee, hold the amount, no, and while investigation are being held, no. So that's I don't think there's a conflict. In fact, FASA actually did take out that conflict of the concern on data privacy, right? I don't think that there should be a problem at all. I'm not just sure about the BSP audit perspective. I'm not sure. Depends on what the audit actually resulted to, or what particular concern there was. But when it comes to fraud investigations, etc., AML investigation, it actually helps taking away that private data privacy particular concern, no. I also forgot to share this earlier. Another thing where interagency approach is being done in the Philippines is the access to what the system that's called e-verify. So here in the Philippines, when you get your national ID, no, you do put in your personal information there, and that system is maintained by the government. They do the validation, they collect information, etc. um, that information in that e-verify system that is maintained by the government can actually be used by financial institution and can be accessed by financial institution for their own due diligence procedure. So for example, I'm a bank, I have a new client. If the client has a national ID, I can go to that system and verify the information that's there, or just get the information of the client that's there. So again, that's another display of interagency approach that they are taking, no, and also making sure that these data privacy crossing from one entity to another, no, are protected from a convenience perspective. That's part of the convenience that's given to a client, that you don't need to give your information over and over again. And then from a protection perspective, let's say for if it's a fraudulent or AML related transaction.
Thank you, Sheila. So, Sheila, there's one more question for you. This is from Jonathan Remorosa from Thrift Bank. He says, as part of our watch list screening, it is very difficult to secure all relatives and close associates of PEPs. BSP is asking us to include this in our watch list database. Is it reasonable to have RCA PEP disclosure form during onboarding?
Yes, we should.
I'm not sure what RCA stand for, but usually this is correct. You do need to identify whether relative and close associate. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so typically you do have this database and you build that database over time. Usually we do subscribe to that, and in addition to that, there is normally banks would have this particular statement in the account opening forms where it asks you about, are you related to a politically exposed person, no, and then obviously they are committed to responding to that accurately, and that's when you start also adding to that watch list database. But there are watch list database that you could actually have access to, and then improve further as you get more information.
To add to what Sheila said, at the point of onboarding, actually you have to have that question ready in your mandate and get that information, but ensure to enter that into your system as well. Otherwise, you will not capture that in your screening. And in the system, it's best if you can have segregations, as you say, RCA, whether a customer is a co-PEP, or if not, on what basis he is a PEP. So then when it comes to your screening and your enhanced due diligence for PEPs, that will come very handy at a later stage. So have to have the database plus the system ready for such screening and analysis for PEPs especially.
But to be fair, I'm not discounting the fact that it's hard to build this database.
Very hard, yes.
In fact,
very true.
I did qualifying first degree, second degree, third degree, fourth degree. That in itself, I had to explain several times to different officers in the bank, directors, etc., of who is considered first, second, third, and fourth. No, plus the fact that close associate does not necessarily mean that you are related to them by blood. You could be, a close associate because you have close relations for whatever reason, and that's another problem, no. So it is indeed very hard to have that. Yes, correct. There will be those who will be selling or will have that information ready. Building it's not easy. It could also be costly, to purchase. And I think because this came from a rural bank, I think there were initial discussions before where rural bank may want to band together and purchase these types of subscription as a group, and so it could be more economical for all the banks. But I lost touch on that subject, but there was that discussion before on how the rural banks or the smaller banks will be able to cope, no?
Yeah, that's actually something we're finding in many countries, Sheila. Many of the smaller institutions, that sector is getting together and buying things
As a
as a
group.
sector, not as an institution, and
Yes.
applying. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there are no more audience questions, but I have one last question for each of you in closing, and it's a bit of gazing into the future. So, I think we know the data privacy area is evolving. It's going to get more and more complex. So, do you have a quick wish list in terms of how you would like things to proceed in the future, so that your job in AML compliance will get easier or at least not get more difficult?
True. Shall I go first?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes. One big wish. If we can have a centralized, regulated database, one contact point. So we are all like maybe as Sheila mentioned, the NIC or the personal identification registration at the government level. If that institution or maybe the credit first, like in Sri Lanka we have Credit Information Bureau. Likewise, if there's some central agency which can collect and secure customer, rather the personal data, in if FIs, financial institutions, banks, and other FIs can access such, I think then we are fine. Then there's no need for each institutions to go after customers and collect data and assess and do KYC CDD. So if we can go for that common KYC, common KYC sort of a thing, I think that will be one of my wishes for the future.
Yeah. Sheila, Joseph?
This is a wish that I hope will come very soon. And it's what we started to discuss earlier. I'd like to see AI taking a more active role on financial crime. I attend, financial crime is being done by AI as well. And so it just doesn't do that. You do it, you fight manually versus an AI triggered crime. No, I mean, it's like going to a war. Your opponent has all these bombs, and you have a rusty old knife. And so I'd like to see AI figure more into this cause. There are available AIs out there, but there's a lot of deterrence to it. Number one, data availability. Number two, the cost. Maybe we can consider data privacy because, as Joseph mentioned earlier, we need a lot of data for AML protection or for to figure out how to fight for AML. Maybe sometimes it gets in the way, but from a point of view of a financial crime, I'd like to see AI take a higher precedence, or to accelerate more, and so that we'll be able to effectively fight, and at least evenly, we have an even footing now with all the fraudsters, with all those bad actors in our financial environment.
Thanks. Joseph, it's over to you, and this is the rare opportunity that you get, to have the last word when there are two of you in the room. So,
I like that shit. So I think just to sum it up from what Thilani and Sheila have said, I think one of the key things I think we'll be looking forward to, I think, is maybe standardization in terms of unification of information that is, I think, being housed across the regions, across the countries, across the financial institutions, because also what we have in terms of the data, I think it's siloed so currently, so it also affects in terms of how we fight AML CFT. If we at all were able to actually also share these national PEP lists, these PIP lists across the different regions, because if I'm sending money from Zambia to the Philippines, if I don't know that that other person perhaps is actually a politically exposed person, definitely in terms of also the monitoring of the transactions, definitely is also hampered. So definitely we could also have some of these national lists as well consolidated, and when we have at least an international list as well in terms of certain key people that we need to look out for in terms of the PIPs as well. That will also help in terms of that. And even as we are also looking at the use of AI in terms of the fight of money laundering, definitely, obviously, we need more governance in terms of us using ethical AIs, not where the AI is also hallucinating, because we're also feeding it insufficient data as well. So definitely, I think we need to be able to, I think, really bridge the gap in terms of how we're regulating in terms of the data minimization across the regions, because right now we have different regulations in terms of data privacy across the different countries, and it's not harmonized. There's a fight for data localization that's, I think, on the growing end. So definitely it's also getting to impact in terms of how we fight AML CFT. So I think it would be good for us to have I think a consolidated approach in terms of the fight of AML safety as well as data privacy. For at least for AML safety, at least if I recommendations, at least are giving us clearer guidelines in terms of what each jurisdiction needs to at least go down and localize. From data privacy, I think everyone has been coming up with different regulations, but though most of them have come through from the GDPR, but then we need to have at least even ministry evaluations as well on data privacy being done for various jurisdictions, because we're at different levels currently. But I think from the AML CFT side, I think because of the mutual evaluations, those ones have actually helped us in terms of also being at least at almost the same pace in terms of this aspect. But data privacy, on the other hand, is currently lagging, and I hope that we could have that approach. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Thanks, Thilani. Thanks, Sheila, for taking the time and effort, in being on this webinar and sharing your knowledge with all the participants. I think we had over 800 participants today. I think about 500 on Zoom and the rest on YouTube. So I think what you have said has really benefited so many people and so many institutions. So thanks to all the panelists. Thank you all the participants for spending the last hour with us, and I hope you found it useful. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.